it. Like, don't do like, hi everybody, we're here. Yeah, we're just doing the recordings. Let's just jump right into it.
Okay.
You know, I think the idea of storytelling, counterfactuality, and the appearance of contradiction and what that distinction is, why that matters, I think is worth our discussion right now.
Yeah. Like for me, when a contradiction is realized, that just means you're in or perhaps watching a story unfold before your eyes, and that it's not actually just revealing some static image of what someone thinks a situation is. And it helps, propel, not it helps propel, but it is the means in which a story unfolds. Like, it's not just one contradiction. It's going to be numerous contradictions that all necessarily like thematically correlate with each other in some way. So just like pointing out a contradiction in a certain sense is not the end of the story at all. That's what I was thinking when you were saying. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, Javier, so we said off the record before we started recording, because I think you're going to say it again, the idea of the assumption of the exposure of a contradiction is that there's some kind of essential core, that if you don't have a contradiction, if you don't have essential core, there is no contradiction. The only tension, or the point I wonder about this, is when we talk about privately about it, was friendship, the friend. That it is something that has to be, that's something that is there, right? That kind of holds together, even in the face of contradiction, the care of this person as her friend. No?
Well, I mean, to me, it really all depends how we want to describe it, right? So like, I could say, instead of contradiction, I could say widening our human sentiments, right? So in contrast to the friend, it's more about widening your humans. It's more about widening the descriptions that you already buy into, right? Contradiction could be seen as something like, I buy into these set of descriptions of the world. I don't buy into anything else. But then something happens, a new set of descriptions are revealed, and someone's like, okay, well, that's a contradiction. Now we have a problem. So to me, there's a sense in which it all depends how we want to describe it. You can describe it in the way you're describing it, and then we could go into that kind of conversation. But I also think just changing the word to like widening, it also changes that sentiment.
But here's the other aspect. But if it's something that you esteem, like I actually remember the example of Luber and you were talking a lot about, with, like, for example, you're super pro ICE, like you're an ICE agent, you're pro deportation, like you want to get all the foreigners out, right?
Yeah.
Then you find out in this storytelling example that your wife, who you love, is an illegal immigrant, and now you got the absolute choice to either honor the principle that you claim to orient your life around, or the human person, the friendship of your beloved, right, your wife. And I think the example Luber would talk about with this was that you only find out in the abysmal state, especially I think the example Luber said, he chooses to honor the principle, right, and sacrifice the beloved. And he finds out that it was worthless. The principle was wrought, right? Was actually empty from the beginning. So I'm thinking about that. So it's not, I don't know if you want to call it out. Is that widening, or is that, I think that's almost the tension here, is like, is that an exposure when a principle's gone all the way and you find it's failure, or is this an widening?
Yeah. So if we buy into the distinction between principles, for example, this would be the pragmatic take. The pragmatic take is, if we move away from the essentialist position, meaning like there is no right or wrong principle, there's just only more or less useful principles, then there is no, in some sense, like their principle was really wrong. But there is a sense in which you're now in a situation where your principle is no longer useful. And you have to, in some sense, deal with it.
In both cases,
Yeah, in both
I just
cases,
want to
I
point.
think you still end up with practically the same response.
Well, both cases you end up with a contradiction. They're just at different time. They're at different times in the plot, so to speak. And the point that I was trying to make in the beginning is every contradiction that gets encountered, all that means is that there's more to the contradiction than you know. There's more to the story. There's more to what you think is happening, and that's all that. Like you don't understand. You're like, huh? How? What?
Well,
Oh wow.
I mean, the thing is, you can refrain. I could rephrase contradiction as
Well, that's what.
there's.
Is that what you mean by widening?
Well, yeah. I mean, widening. I mean, I could elaborate more on the widening. Widening in the sense of like, look, if contradiction is something that gets a revelation of something that you could not expect or anticipate, then essentially it's something like, what if there's something that corresponds to my interest more than I previously thought? So with the ICE agent, for example, he thought that his interest was always deport the immigrants, right?
Mm-hmm.
But all of a sudden, he finds out his own wife is an immigrant. So in your terms, that we could say that's contradiction. In my pragmatic terms, I could say, oh, he just found out that actually he desires something more than he previously thought.
Well, the point is though is when he realizes that it wasn't what he thought it was going to be.
Mm-hmm.
What is the undercurrent of the emotion there? What, like, at every point of a contradiction, what is the possible fallout? Is that fallout motivated by shame or beauty? Because that's the real difference. Like, that's the point here. That's the friendship conversation, because what a friend does is that they're there for the other in such a way that they help the fallout in such a way that it's for the beautiful and not for the shameful.
Right.
Essentially.
Right. And if we agree that the beautiful is essentially this way of redescribing, that is kind of that motive. That's kind of that motive condition.
Yeah, I wrote this earlier today. I said, only when what is shameful comes to the light can beauty shine forth and change your life. Now, reading that out loud, I don't think I should use the word only in the beginning. But the point of the thought that I just wrote down was in the ICE agent's example, right?
Yeah.
Why it's like, oh, I turned in my wife and life for whatever reason still sucks for me. Okay, I'm being vague and crude here. The reason is because the shame, there's a shame component to it where there was an image in their head that if they exit a situation, there's two ways that the person could exit the situation. It's they exit the situation with their wife or they exit the situation with their principal, right? And they had an image of their head in terms of what would it be. And I would say the beauty position would be like, you don't exit the relationship, you exit the principal. That's what I'm thinking.
You don't exit the relationship, you exit the principal.
Right, because the ICE agent, if they didn't exit the relationship, they would probably be in a more the motivation is more beautiful is my assumption. Like the story goes on and they're in a more state of a comedia state and not a tragic state is what I'm thinking. Sorry, go ahead, Joaquin.
Well, no, the rub on that is because the principle is it's an abstractional social good, right? The immigrant. It's a symbolic imaginary object that his orientation was around. That's very different from the human person of his wife.
Right.
So that's actually why I agree with this instinct. Almost always the shame is that you basically got duped. You picked something. Actually, a good example, quite frankly, when Judas betrays Jesus, that's exactly what happened. He chose gold. He chose shekels over his friend. And the shame, it is shekels. I'm just being honest. That's what it is.
No, it's just funny. Sorry.
That's the point. That's why he had to kill himself. He felt compelled to do it because that's the shame aspect. He betrayed he betrayed a particular friend, Jesus in this case, over an abstractional good, which is a fungible thing of money, you know?
I mean, like, to me, there's a sense in which we could describe shame as saying shame only exists so far as we assume there's nothing more else to desire that's imaginable, right? Like, if we don't stretch the limits of our imagination and things are the way things are, then it seems to be the breeding place for shame. You know,
I think what needs to be coupled with that is the lack of particularity that goes with shame. You do an action, like what I'm trying to tease out is you act on a certain feeling that you have. If you just act on a pure, like on a feeling you have, right? Oh, I'm gonna do this because me desiring this and fulfilling it, I feel good. I feel more alive in some capacity, right? That is an abstraction. That is not a particular thing. Like person, situation, like what could fulfill that abstraction is a multitude of possible situations.
Yeah, the fungibility of it.
There is a fun, right? That's that, and I think when boredom, I think there's a lot of different situations happen, but like when boredom or like something along those lines, that type of negative sentiment, let's say, it's easier to basically do the fungibility move
I mean,
sorry.
And my only, I don't really have a pushback because I don't disagree, but I do imagine that people that don't read philosophy would have a hard time understanding that you're saying that this is an abstraction, because for them, kind of like the way Whitehead calls this, is a lot of our abstractions are like feel concrete to us. But go ahead, Jochen.
I can give an example. Basically, when people emotionally eat, that's a virtual abstract relationship. We all know that.
I do that all the time.
Yeah, I mean, I've been doing that last 3 days. So I'm upset as fuck. So I was telling my girlfriend this. I'm like, I'm upset, and I notice I'm eating emotionally. It's not because I'm hungry.
Have you sucked it from McDonald's?
It's gonna McDonald's.
Listen. They got that $1 summer iced coffee deal. I'm all about it.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think this is the perfect point to drop in that, like, basically particularity would be another way of saying widening our human sentiments. Because if you think about this, when we read literature, it does have to do with particularity. It's particular characters that have particular stereotypes, versus when we deal in our own lives, we don't have enough of a circle to even begin to be something like sympathetic, right? And the only reason why the ICE agent would even begin to be sympathetic is because he's never had somebody that he loves that's actually an immigrant. Right?
Sorry, not to cut you off. I think what I'm thinking, what you're making me think is the real point here is that when you think you point out a contradiction, you're not associating your action with a particularity. You're actually associating it with an abstraction. Like a contradiction, if you're like, oh, that's a contradiction, I'm going to expose that. That isn't a particular, like, that is some image of what you think is what's going on. And that doesn't capture the magnitude of what's really happening. And I think that's why the whole storytelling notion of contradiction of it not just being another beat in the plot, so to speak, is not really an end-all be-all contradiction, that the compelling feeling of exposure dissipates because you don't see contradiction as this, like, this is the truth and I'm going to expose the truth. and more it situates it in this is a partial object, partial truth.
Mhm.
And that way the brevity, like the gravity of the exposure, it's not this, you're going to be like, I don't need to make a show out of this because there's more to what I know. It's a more private affair. And this gets into more like private versus public affairs.
I mean,
Basically.
we're kind of making a critique against Hegelians, to be fair, because if you think about it, the way I've understood Hegelians is the source of their logic is you have to find the opposing contraries, expose them, and that reveals a contradiction. Right? You can suss out the contradiction.
Right.
And but what's interesting about this is that Hegelians spend time looking for the contradiction versus, and I think there's a very probably interesting correlation here between why friendship isn't taken seriously versus not, because in my opinion, friendship wouldn't be interested necessarily in exposing the contradictions. It would be interested in widening the human sentiment. And so it's almost like you could say competing tools of use. What happens if we only use analytical tools to suss out contradictions? What happens there versus kind of like a method of friendship, of widening sympathies? Because fundamentally, to me, at the end of the day, that's kind of really what contradiction means. Contradiction just means a not yet widened circle of sympathy that is possible.
Javier, I think you put the quote out. I forgot where you put it. Something like, "No one ever died from a contradiction."
Yeah, that's Deleuze. That's Deleuze. Deleuze says that. Yeah. But yeah, it's my favorite quote. Yeah, nobody dies from a contradiction.
The point is that contradictions in concept or in the space of concepts. They're not in the particular. It's the tension usually between an action and the concept, right? Or two concepts, right? So you see, that's what the issue is. The issue is because the thing about a friend is that friend's still here. He's still present. They're still present with you, even with the contradiction. That's the catch. Because normally under a kind of formal logic, a contradiction means that the synthesis of the predicate and the subject are not in the same place. You see, synthesis means, because it means same place. This thesis means place. It's ideas place. So synthesis is in the same place as the predicate and the subject, at least from formal logic, or from a syllogism point of view. So that's all that contradiction shows, that this concept and is not in this place. These two concepts were found in the same place that were contrary when they shouldn't be. That's all that means. Yet in reality, in topos, in the extensional reality, it is there. Let alone horror in terms of space, of the human person exists in a space, just to draw out more what we mean by this distinction from Hegelians.
And I think publicly it's okay to talk about, the concept to concept contradiction. And I think the concept to concept contradiction in conversation can cover a multitude of particular situations. And the irony is a particular situation that should be which is experienced intimately and privately. It always happens like it's always like a first person thing, right? Reveals an explosion of possible concepts in play that you can't just boil it down to competing things.
Go ahead, Jari.
It's the problem of desire. Like in this, fucking desire, man, fuck shit up so bad. No, because I'm saying, because the point is that what it reveals is that desire wants what it wants, and it's going to reveal itself one way or the other. So and that's normally what happens here. and a suppression occurs because a presentation of a certain moral order is presented. Desire is going to do what it wants, and it's going to show up. It will show up somewhere. And that's actually typically where the contradiction shows up, which, by the way, is a whole nother domain. Like, the biggest problem in human communication is multiple levels of it happening at the same time. There's the content of the conceptual information, then there's the motivation of the concept, the pragmatism, from formal linguistics, the pragmatisms of the context in which those statements are made. So at the higher level, but then at the lower level, the human persons who are uttering it and their motivations about it, which might be attached to memory. Like, I say X, but really, like, I'll give an example. My mother, in Islamic tradition, dreams are very important religious experiences. They're a contact with divine images. It's possible. Like, those things do exist. My father passed away in New Year's. My mother had a dream of my father visiting the house, and he existed. He was like, he went to every room. He was physical, and she touched him in the dream. I share this with my girlfriend, and she's agnostic, a materialist agnostic. So she doesn't believe in the afterlife, and she was talking me through that content level, and I'm getting really intense with her and points about it, and I'm catching myself. It's not about the concepts. It's not about the issue of her not believing in the afterlife and life after death and all that. It's that I miss my father, and I want the conversation to land there. So me and talking about my mother's dream, it's not about the content of supernatural existence and the imaginal space under Islamic theology. That's the content level, and using art. And I was using argumentation of memory and how memory is in place and it's in matter. Like, I was going down this whole line of argument about it, when in reality, deep down inside, you know what I really want to talk about? And eventually I realized, and I caught myself, and I said, I miss my dad. And I started crying. So you see, like, this is always the catch. Every communication act has multiple levels of motivation and intention and information. It's not just the raw concept side. It's the desire and motivation side, which also from Aristotelian counts. Knowledge never moves anything. Desire moves things.
Well, I mean, it seems like you're getting at the point of, like, and I feel like people would, at least I feel like intellectual people would resist this idea of, because Luber brought this up before, of like, sometimes it's just really simple motivations, versus this kind of like fluffed up reason enhanced structure of like, oh, this is why dreams are so important, when really it's just double speak for like, I just miss my dad. Go ahead, Jochen.
I was going to comment. I thought we were going to bring up bringing ideas or sharing things with someone, because it's basically a child wanting to share the macaroni art, as the example I said online.
Well, yeah, I mean I think it's sometimes it's like that simple.
Well,
I think it's that simple.
From if you're looking at the situation from a person to person motivations kind of thing, or a person to place, why they go there, whatever, it's probably simple, is my opinion. I'm being again crude and just like a little dogmatic here. It gets complex when it's not just a person to place. Like, you see it as a person to place, or you see it as a very much like a dichotomy of sorts, but it's never a dichotomy. Like what do you mean? There's always more to the story. Like, people say that when a dichotomy gets exposed, when a contradiction, when a two gets exposed. It's not a two. This is where like the proportionality stuff really comes in play here, because it's literally not just like you don't count to two and you find truth. Basically, you feel me? I know that's a little vague, but I'm yeah.
Well, I was just gonna add, listen, multiple accounts multiple levels can be happening at the same time. Like, does it matter to me having a theological account, having a supernatural account? Yes, it does. In fact, that motivates why I miss my father. Because if you want to go down that line of thought, just to give a concrete example, like, why I miss my father, because I love him very much. And the whole idea of So, and then quite frankly, the fact that one big part of it is a massive sense of relief, again, within the theological account, because Christian Catholics have the same position. Basically, if in heaven your body's restored and you're restored to in your rejuvenated state of around 33 years, it's like a whole description. About 33 years old, any maladies are removed from you. My brother was paralyzed, for example, and he was those. My mom gave me those descriptions. He was 33 years old. He was around the 30s. He looked exactly that time when he got married. He didn't have the maladies. He had pristine clothing, like all these descriptions that in our Islamic theology tells us he got to heaven. That's the point. So you see this that theological account really matters, because that informs the feeling of not only missing my dad, but also a massive sense of relief that he's okay, right? So it's just a sense of like loving him, missing him, and knowing he's okay. Like, see, that's the complexity of the emotions. So that's multiple levels happening at the same time. Now, ultimately, what you first wanted, what I wanted from my girlfriend, was that acknowledgement of the first point, not the theological, supernatural, materialist accounts of is there life after death, what's the soul, and et cetera, et cetera. You see, I'm just commenting that, like, just on your point, Luber, it's not just two accounts. It's not two. It's a explosion of multiplicities that also confound that have relationships with each other.
Right. And like, just to clarify, like in your example here, like the theological tension, it's like that's in her mind the situation. You see how
that was the original problem.
That's how myopic it is. Like in that, just commenting on that one example, but like, that's why the concept to me of having a real conversation publicly is impossible, in the sense of it's an ongoing conversation. What have we been talking for 3 days? Like, could you imagine if we were talking the amount we actually talk, like off the net, like we wouldn't be able to record all that. Like we would need someone following us. We would be literally like streaming at that point. Like it would be 24/7 almost. Not like we're talking 24/7, but like it's just not a reasonable expectation to follow or even have a real conversation publicly. Like if someone was following our conversation offline, what are they doing in their life? They're just sitting at home the whole time, like what are they doing?
I think for me, the issue with using the word real conversation is that it rubs up against the skepticism of only these intellectuals believe they're having real conversations, right? Look at these intellectuals having, quote, real conversations. Versus what's our actual point when we say real conversation? Our actual point is there's certain ways of having conversations that we believe is actually more useful, more pragmatic to, or let's put it this way. Actually, it would be more like there's ways of conversing that people have really yet to entertain and explore if they don't know the possibilities of exploring. And then I think also to kind of respond to like Jockin's point about like it's a multiplicity. What I think gets a little bit complicated with that when it comes to widening the human sentiments is if you see how those multiplicities start shrinking immediately once I am not interested in the things that you're interested in. Like the moment I'm not interested in what you're interested in, those multiplicities almost like fade to the background. So there's a sense in which the only thing I'm interested in is he trying to convert me right now? Is that what I'm getting at? Because that would interest me. That corresponds with my interest. I don't want to be converted. I don't want to be convinced of Islam, right? But then Jockin has to regurgitate the priority of why he decided to bring this up in the first place, which is to simply say, I miss my father. Even though all those multiplicities are there. That's true. And they're important. They're important to each of us. However, when it comes to this radical difference of the other person, those multiplicities might have to shrink And then at the same time, they might have to go under a kind of rearrangement of priority in terms of like, actually, all I'm trying to say is I feel really passionate about this topic and I feel like it's important. And I feel like people should listen to this. Obviously, it's very important to me, but if someone's not buying the sauce, then it doesn't really matter.
Mhm.
Right?
Well, the macaroni art. I, so I think what the whole distinction between like an intellectual and a normal person that doesn't consider themselves an intellectual, right? The reason why an intellectual does even consider themselves an intellectual is because they think and we talked about this the other day, where it's like the intellectual thinks that they're able to talk in a way that it cuts through the multiple dimensionality of things at hand. And that's why they call themselves an intellectual, versus a normal person kind of has to go like almost like one at a time. Like we have to move on. I have to understand like it's like I don't see it on these levels. I just see it as you're Muslim. Like and you're talking to me like that, right? So there's that. But the problem with the intellectual space, from my experience, is the difference between like analytic and continental philosophy, where it's like, as an analytic philosopher, you make words and break them down into smaller words to describe an account, and the way that you describe an account should cut through all conversation, and it does to such a cuts through all possible dimensions of a situation, and it does. And guess what it results in? Not a lot of conversation. The continental side of things, instead of breaking down words into smaller words to describe their account, they use broader words that have a bigger umbrella in order to describe the account. They don't, and then they make dimensions within that broader term that they're using. Right?
Yeah.
Like substance, Spinoza. It's not, it's a very encompassing term, right? But there's different like dimensions. And that's what ethics is talking about. Heidegger and Dasein, obviously.
Not to interrupt, Luber, but I feel like continentals, it's more like metonymies. Like it's sliding. It's kind of positionality sliding through dimensionalities, right? So concepts will then bump onto other concepts, and you start putting this kaleidoscope of orientation, right, through the sliding through by similarity or association or proximity, right? Versus analytics, they're just piercing right through, trying to basically break it down.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I guess what I'm trying to say is that because of that kaleidoscope effect, which I think you described, that's a better way of describing it. It's harder to feel like you're saying something real because it becomes depersonalized. Like in both cases, there's a depersonalization involved. But the problem is, to make it personal, you have to want to make it personal. Who are you going to want to make it personal with? Your friends. Like, you're not going to want to make it personal if it's not with your friends. You're not going to actually want to make it vulnerable and intimate if it's not with your friends.
I mean, by the way, this does happen in all these spaces. It's just that it gets hidden away. You want to antinomy or strife or basically competition, envy, all this stuff is in play. I can tell you so many. I mean, every academic can tell you all the bullshit that goes on behind scenes that is hidden behind the discourse space, right? What's presented to the public, but it's absolutely coloring and guiding. And there's so many things in history. We know that. We've seen so many examples of that. Affairs, jealousies, trepidations, envy, things like that. So these are very much, and that's the thing. That's always like, that's almost a hermeneutic of the postmodern position to go, okay, but really what this is about is power, right? Or about different elements of that. So if anything, we're actually trying to draw out that when we say a real conversation, we mean an addressing of this of all these multiplicities. You got to do it.
Mhm.
Otherwise, you're going to get bamboozled one way or the other. You're going to be missing something. And then the
agree.
argument of exposure, of contradiction, you think you got them and got this picture when in reality you didn't capture it at all. Mostly because you're probably
Right.
missing something.
From the outsider perspective, it's the opposite of what you think you look like. That's the irony. Like, it's literally, I'm pointing out the contradiction because it's the right thing to do. It's the right thing because you're so like caught up in this image. Someone that's looking at it, not in that image, like, oh, there's this story that's unfolding. You're typically seen as, the opposite, which is normally like the person's nightmare.
But also, even that example, usually when that person has that sense of justice, like they're doing it for the right reason. I'm doing it because it's right. Probably almost always a secondary reason, some kind of some interpersonal motivation, but why you think it's right to do it this way.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing I want to add is, like, with the continental analytic, the risk, like, I do like what you're saying, like what you guys are saying about the analytic. The risk with the analytic is it becomes simple, but it's never personal. It's like a simple kind of personal. Like it's a simple, but it's devoid of personal. Right? This is the objective standard in which we can determine, after breaking down the parts, we can have clarity about the concept and we can move on, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas like the continentals, like, it's never simple. Right? But then what's weird about both positions is, like, they're obfuscating something like the personal in there. Right? And so what I mean by, like, the simple is it probably comes down to a personal motivation at the end of the day. However we want to describe it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, whatever the statements are, whatever the philosophies are, it's going to come down to something simple. But it's not simple in the sense of in the sense of actually grappling with the difference at hand. Because I think there's layers to this in the sense of, if you actually believe you're having a conversation in which you guys are just debating indifferently about the truth of a religion, then sure, you can go on forever. But half the time, we all know to some degree, nobody walks away with their minds changed. So what's the purpose of this exchange? What's the motivation for this exchange? To simply keep reaffirming the belief in the fact that you know it's true. That's it. Why do TikTokers always show up every single day having debates, and yet they know for a fact their minds are never going to be changed? And you know what they say? The first thing they say out of their mouth, I just want a genuine conversation. I just want genuine conversation. So I just need you to show me why you believe in God and be honest about it. But the thing is, there is no such thing as honesty for them. It's always a cope. It's always a God of the gaps conversation. So what genuine conversation are we talking about? Go ahead, Luber. What time? How much time you got left?
You got 20 minutes.
Like 20 minutes. Yeah,
Okay.
I'm good. I lost my thought. It's just it was something you said in the beginning that
How about I
made me.
rephrase it this way? As philosophers, why do we show up here every day having these conversations?
Oh, I remember now. I remember
Okay,
now.
there
Thank
you go.
you. Thank you.
Yeah,
Okay,
there you
okay. There is no such thing as destroying a project, was what you were making me think. There is no such thing as destroying a thought path.
Mhm.
Like like you reveal a contradiction, right? Oh, Heidegger's entire philosophy can be constructed as care, but he was a Nazi? What?
Mhm.
Like he was a Nazi. You're Jewish, Andrew. What are you doing? You know? Um like his thought path can't be reduced to the fact that he was a Nazi. That's the point. Like, yes, it's something to think about. It's part of the multi-dimensional layer of Heidegger's thought path and who Heidegger is. But that's going to be the case for every thought path, for every person. And it never can get exhausted because it could always get picked up by somebody in the future. That's why there is no such thing as someone finishing a project. It's always going to not be, it's always going to go unfinished. And there will always be a chance of it being brought. It can always come back in some capacity. Someone can find it, have their own way of saying it, have their own way of expanding it, a new way of bringing it before your eyes. Daniel always had this quote that I loved. He has a lot that I love. One is, yes, it's been said. I'm probably fucking it up, but like it's
I
like,
think I
yeah,
know
it's been
what you're
said.
talking about.
Yeah, it's been said, but the question is, have you heard it?
Yeah.
So it from a real pragmatic standpoint, right? There really is no such thing as destroying a thought path. The reason why we keep doing philosophy is because we're excavating, we're scaffolding. That's what it is. We keep having conversations where it's like, wait, I don't know the answer. That's what, like, I don't know how to proceed. Not even the answers, right? I don't even know how to proceed. Like, we keep thinking and talking to each other, and then eventually what happens is a genuine mystery appears where it's like, I don't even know what to think. I have that all the time. All the time.
Yeah.
Maybe that's like, maybe someone could be like, yeah, that's just because you're stupid. But like, that's for me though. Like, who cares? Like, for me, it's like, whoa, I can't, how do I go about this? That's part of the conflict, so to speak, of my journey. It makes no difference whether they think it's stupid. It's the reality is it's something that I have to, it's something that I'm encountering, working through, dealing with. And I have other friends. I have people that are also doing the same thing from their own perspective. And that's like another reason why it can't be destroyed. It's like, for example, it's like we all have our own accounts. We all have our own perspective on the beautiful. But
Yeah.
like,
Mhm.
you know, I get hit by a bus after this conversation. Like, that doesn't necessarily mean my project's done or like the,
I'm never saying theme again.
exactly right. Like, it's like ridiculous. It's like ridiculous. But I kind of lost the point there at the end. But I'll pass it off.
Well, I mean, what I want to say was, there's so many ways to redescribe and approach things, and even philosophy itself. Like, if you only think that philosophy is this intellectual endeavor, then you confine yourself, and this is the trap. This is the normative developmental trap of philosophy is an intellectual activity. Well, if you define it that way, now it's going to be this standard of whether you are intellectual enough to participate in the activity, which is how most people talk about it. Or you could say philosophy is a way of redescribing the world through various texts. You encounter Heidegger, that's a whole set language game. Dasein, being in the world. You enter Aristotle, you've never thought about virtue, how that works, how that functions. It can all redescribe to your purposes a world in which you never thought was possible, because what you thought was, oh, and this kind of answers against like, why should I bother reading the old philosophical thinkers? They're done. they're toast. Nobody takes them seriously, right? But if you take my perspective on it, it's like, well, they're not toast in the sense of you can read them. I actually like to advocate for this idea of creative misunderstanding of a text, not in a malicious way of like, oh, actually Aristotle's this, blah, 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 blah. But versus like, what if you could read Aristotle in such a way that the only constraint is find something useful in Aristotle. Force yourself to find something useful in Aristotle. Even if you swear to God you can't see it, widen your imagination and find a way to find something useful in Aristotle. And I promise you, those will be the most interesting readings and insights that you could add to your life that you could have never imagined. It doesn't have to be this kind of loyalty reading of like, this is what he actually says, this is what he doesn't. I think there's purposes for that. That's academic philosophy. But if you're just a normal lay person and you want to understand, you want to ask this reason of like, why am I doing philosophy? Why should I bother doing philosophy? It's an intellectual activity. Well, that's a certain description that we don't have to buy into. Go ahead, Jochen.
Only thing I would say, I mean, it's an intellectual activity to find out who you are. Like, I'm not kidding in the sense that most people work by the givens. You quote Daniel's project, they operate on the givens of their society and what they're told. They're told by the other, by their parents, by their tradition, by their community, who they are. What is the right way to live? What is the right way to desire, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's fine. I guess you can choose to participate in that. But the whole point of philosophy is that may not be the only way to understand things. You can perfectly, right? That's the point. It builds the equipment of seeing possibility. That what do I desire? What do I want? Do I want what other people want? What society wants? What's the other wants?
I think I would add, just to prevent the contrary description of being dumb, because that's what a normal person would associate with intellectual activity. But the way you're describing it is more like an act of the imagination, creativity. If we want to say intelligence is actually a creative way of being in the world, then I do believe we should be more intellectual. But if we think intellectual is being a kind of, there's a superior way in terms of like, there's people that are smarter and there's people that are less intelligent and they can't do it, versus like intelligence is actually an act of imagination in a way of being in the world. But the only way you can stress your imagination is encountering all the types of descriptions in which the world was already previously described. You can't even begin to entertain those things.
Well, just to build on this is why friendship matters so much. Because guess what? I only got so much time. I make my commitment. Actually, that's one thing. Listen, I'm someone who did the commitment. I said, Plato, Aristotle, go. That's me. And I try my best to do an honest reading of them, seek to understand, read the secondary scholarship, do the whole thing, right? But with two extra parts. Part one is I'm not just reading I'm not doing this to reproduce the standard account, because guess what? When you actually we went back, you realize, oh, wait a minute, the beautiful was actually there the whole time. It was always there. No one ever saw it. You needed someone needed to do it. Someone had to go back in and find it. That's our role to play. Luber, same thing with Heidegger, with themes all over the place. But apparently no one's talking about it. It's the same move. Let alone Javier. I don't know which project you're working on, but the general idea of virtue ethics and psychoanalysis. Someone's got to do it. Apparently it's going to have to be you. It's actually almost a kind of like begrudging kind of acceptance of like, well, fuck, I guess I'm here. I guess it's going to have to be me. There's nothing special about me, but I guess it's going to have to be me to do it because I don't see anyone else going for it. So I guess it's going to have to be me, right? And the other aspect of that is because of my commitment, I can't read Heidegger the way Luber can. I can't read psychoanalysis like Javier can. I can't read the 50 bazillion books that Daniel Garner has read and God knows what else. So the point is, it's in the community of friendship that I've gotten most of my insights on Heidegger's and storytelling from Luber and Javier from a psychoanalysis from you guys. And I've noticed over the last 5 years of friendship, my account has been cultivated from the friendship community of all you, let alone Daniel. I quote Daniel all the time. I was on my latest course in Paralyzed. I'm citing Daniel like 6 times, and both of you were cited. So I find that's also the big part, is that basically the hope is that you start playing in thought. You play in thought. That's the whole point of this. And what game is fun? You can have a game by yourself that's perfectly fine, right? Cicero says it. You're in philosophy. You're in friendship with the past, but also it's the same action. You can also play with your friends right now. I can play with a soccer ball as much as I want by myself. That's fine. Nothing wrong with that. But it's also a lot more fun to have a soccer game with my friends.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, I think not having this point of view will end you. I really do. Like, I think it's like, how do you ever forgive? Like, how do you ever how do you have longevity with something? I don't even see another way, which in my mind, I'm like, I take pause at that, where I'm like, maybe that's me being myopic, but it's just, friendship is it's in a certain sense such a loose term, in that when you say that you're friends with someone, what that entails and what's gathered up underneath that concept, it's like you can't even think about it in concept. You can only think about it in particular situations. It's like one of those words where it's like that. It's not really. You could talk about it philosophically, but the enactment of it and the actual having of it can never be something that's philosophical. And like I think with the beauty position, and also its contrast with shame, what it's doing is trying to ground us back into what's right in front of our eyes, because everything that we're consuming and doing and learning is, in a sense, pulling us away from what's right in front of us. Everything is becoming an abstraction. Like, everything is a smooth abstraction. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, I think, like, if some people look at it pragmatically, like in the sense of like, these things are tools. These things can be tools. And if you don't know what's available to you in terms of like what's possible, then you just have no idea. It's kind of like you didn't know that instead of building this whatever project with glue, you could have done it with a hammer, right? You could have done it with a hammer, but you just didn't know what a hammer was. You didn't know it existed.
Or it's like you and your friends are building this thing with glue, and you're doing it, and it's a complete mess, and it actually falls apart. And then you realize the real truth is, it doesn't really matter whether it was put together or fell apart. It was the shared activity.
Right.
Like, that was the real point, like bringing people together and developing friendship. If that has happened, you won already. Like, you really won already. Like, there is no losing the projects it failed or in jeopardy. Like, sorry, go ahead, Jocko.
Well, the one caveat, because there's one point, is that, see, this requires friendship with difference.
Yeah.
If it's similarity, if it's self-similarity, then you're done, because that's going to be the example. Everybody's coming using the same damn instrument, using the same glue.
Right.
Then you will.
That's true. Like in my example, if everyone's just using glue, you're absolutely right. It's not.
The whole point is someone's got to use a lever, someone's got to use a screw, someone has a screwdriver,
Right.
Someone's got a wedge, etc. Right? We all need to come with our equipment, and then what we do together is something none of us can do individually, which is actually, I think, fundamentally the conclusion of friendship in the beautiful. That you must have a wish for the good of the other, and the best good you can give someone else is their enactment of virtue of the beautiful, right? And there's only and It's in their witnessing of their greatness that you actually win too, right? So that obliterates the altruism, selfish issue right there. And especially because actually this is the reason why is justice in the political space so important? To kind of cite from Hegelian logics, right? Is because there's only certain things we can get together. There are only certain actualities possible together that individually you'll never get. Marriage, with children, etc., things like that.
But I do know this will be a charge from a psychoanalytic Hegelian point of view, which is, what do we do with our aggression? Where does our aggression go? Because I actually had heard Cadell raise up this point, and I think this would be the kind of fundamental rebuttal with friendship, which is, where does the aggression go? But I have this suspicion. This is where I have my suspicion. I think the aggression goes in the friendship of difference. Because in the friendship of self-sameness, you have to have someone that's got to take the fall. Someone's got to eat it.
Yeah,
someone's got to be
sacrificed. Desire.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. But I think when it comes to philosophy, like to friendship of difference, I think we take out our aggression at the same time.
Mm-hmm. On the difference itself. On
the difference itself, yeah.
Yeah. Like,
and you can feel it. Like, you can feel it. Like, there's
when we're talking and stuff, but it's there, but inconsequential at the end of it. Like, it's there in the moment.
Yeah.
Like, but it's like, we know there's faith in the other's intention and love. Honestly, that's really what it is, and that's why it's ultimately inconsequential. Something like that. That sounds right. But that is the question of like the enemy, yeah.
Well, I would like to embrace the fact. I would like to embrace the fact, and I know you got to go, Luber. I would like to embrace the fact that as much as there is a friend, like people would say, oh, your friend can become your enemy, right? But I think when we're talking about the philosophy, this friendship of difference, I'm talking about how the enemy can become your friend. Yeah. And that is where the aggression is lying in. That's where it is, the aggression. Because we used to be enemies. And we remember that fact.
Yeah. And actually I actually have personal examples of that. I have individuals that were absolutely my enemy, but then I made a choice to basically forgive. And it was specifically, you know what I remember? I remember the act of forgiveness was exactly on. It was that I could choose to keep this part. And actually, it was actually a very particular moment professionally. It was my professional ended career where I had power over this person. I had every opportunity. This person fucked me over. I got sent into the destitutional wilderness in the 2008 economic crash. I was cast away, right? From safety, support, economic support. This person fucked me over and they made the personal choice to do it. Now, 10 years later, I'm on the other side of it. I had every power to crush this individual. No, I did. I absolutely did. I had the upper hand of power, 100%. And I remember I made the call. I was like, yeah, I could do that. And yeah, that'd be cool. But you know what would be cooler? Doing the other option. And we're actually, and that's the thing, we're still and we're friends ever since. And it took that critical moment. And it was like a mutual recognition that I had the full power and choice to crush, to affirm that you were my enemy and I will crush you as my enemy. And I chose not to activate it. And I went the other way. And then she became one of my closest collaborators.
I think in this case, maybe this is what is meant before we close. Self-sacrifice can be an act of aggression.
Yes. Yeah. You can actually go on a theological account because actually, I think a lot of times usually the discussion of the devil is actually on that point.
Yeah, I could see that. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. All right. Well,
On that lovely note,
yeah. Um,
You want to close, Luber? Okay.
yeah.
Okay. All right. We'll just close this then. All right,
Mhm.
guys. Take care.
All right.